Sometimes it's useful to treat part of the problem as if it were the whole and see with that analysis how far you can go. What's wrong with the vegan movement? Is it drug addiction? Is it the fact that when you have a meeting of other vegan activists, pretty much every single one of them is a drug addict? Well, that can't be the whole of the problem. But if we treat that as the most fundamental problem, how much remains unexplained? Weight loss, people making money out of selling a fad weight loss diet. That can't be the whole of what's wrong with the vegan movement. But that analysis, putting exclusive emphasis on that one factor alone, it explains so much that maybe it's worthwhile, at least as one stage of our analysis, to treat that partial problem as if it were the whole. People get enthused about learning languages so that they can revert to watching TV shows and movies the way they did as a child. Again, I think that in my live streams and YouTube videos up to this point, I've just mentioned this rapidly in passing. Like, oh yeah, it's a second childhood for these people. They declare that they're going to become a polyglot, and now they've got this intellectually respectable pretext to wallow in manga and anime and video games to live out a second childhood. I think what I'm avoiding dealing with, because I myself am uncomfortable talking about this, reflecting on this. I'm avoiding dealing with the extent to which these people developed competence in their own first language by watching movies, by watching television. That this is the only thing they're capable of. That in many ways, my fellow English speakers on this planet in this generation are still stuck at a pre-verbal level of development. That they're intellectually handicapped in their own first language because of the overwhelming significance of watching movies and television in English as the exclusive pedagogical tool that helped them develop conversational ability in their own first language. I once saw a YouTube video from a guy, vegan guy, who was very serious about martial arts, about fighting sports. So competitive in the gym martial arts, not the same as martial arts for the military, other kinds of applications and uses of martial arts, of fighting skills as they're studied and taught. Okay? This guy, he may be a little bit of a psychopath. I mean, there may be a little bit of cruelty and evil mixed in with this advice. But I remember him talking about how important it was to have the experience of getting down on the mat and having your ass kicked, of being in one fight after another that you just can't win, of lying there and feeling like you're suffocating because someone else is just better than you, the end. And you try to turn it around, you try to reverse a grapple hold, you try to flip things over on the mat, on the floor, what they call groundwork. You try, and it's hopeless. And again, what's the moral of the story? Is there a little bit of psychology of cruelty built into this? Well, obviously the guy has a point. And the contrast I would make is to the experience of watching martial arts in an action movie where you don't take a risk, you don't suffer, and you don't ever get humiliated. We're talking about a whole generation of people who developed surface level familiarity with like witty repartee from watching movies. They know what it is to have a comeback from movies and TV shows where people cut each other off and make little, shallow, incisive remarks and observations, but they don't know what it's like to learn through suffering, to really get into conversations with their fellow human beings where, you just get wiped out. And look, you may think I'm going to go to examples of a conversation where you're talking to someone who's just so much older than you and so much wiser than you. They've done so much more research than you on a specific topic that they outclass you. They overwhelm you in this conversation. But you know what? If you're humble enough, you can learn something important from a conversation with a fool. I remember I had a conversation with a guy, utterly evil, despicable idiot. I know what he's done with his life since then, in the many years since we had this conversation. Remember I had a conversation with this guy. By the way, this was a white guy who became completely fluent in Chinese. He totally mastered the Chinese language. And I'd written this article about Chinese politics and Chinese history. And I had just one dishonest, misleading sentence in there where I said, there was no shift in the Chinese government's policy at this time. There was no change in policy. Super vague, super misleading. And he caught me on it. And he said, look, this kind of turn of phrase, like it's just dishonest, it's just misleading, it's just bad writing. And sure, part of me at first felt like, hey, come on, this article I put a lot of work into, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of good in it. Do you really have to punish me for this one bad sentence? Part of me wanted to, have a response to this guy, which is ultimately spurious of this kind. I remember like a split second goes by and I thought, no, he's right. And it doesn't matter that he's an idiot. It doesn't matter that he's ignorant. It doesn't matter that he's a totally immoral person. Like I know other things about him and his life. On this issue, he's right. He is teaching me an important lesson, whether he knows it or not, whether he has good intentions or not, doesn't matter. And, I'm going to accept the criticism. And I'm going to write back to him and say, you're right, you're goddamn right. And I'm never going to put pen to paper and write another sentence like that. You know what? It's one bad sentence in a good article and it ruins it. It was a shitty, stupid, shallow, misleading thing for me to say. And by the way, on some level, like linguistically, it was me repeating a phrase I've heard on the TV news since my childhood. That's the sort of jargon news readers tend to use. Like, oh, there's been no change in foreign policy. There's been no change in government policy. What are you really talking about? What are you really saying? No change in policy. Whatever. I'm not saying whatever it is you have to say, come out and say it, right? Let's really be honest. Let's really be brutal here. For whatever reason, I find it easy to criticize the culture of video games. I find it easy to criticize the culture of like university education, high school education, classroom education in general. And I'm very uncomfortable dealing with the influence that TV shows and movies have had on people in their own first language. And then with this polyglot phenomenon, we're making it worse because that's how we've redefined the purpose and the process of second language education, third language education, so on and so forth. Right? Now, this video isn't about why I'm uncomfortable with it. The world changed in a subtle and significant way when we went from broadcast television to the relatively cheap and ubiquitous availability of DVDs, right? That was already a big change. Can you just imagine having the whole of the TV show Star Trek on VHS cassette? It'd be an enormous collection. Even if there were a VHS video store willing to rent that to you, How are you're gonna carry it out to your car in a series of boxes? Like, it's just massive. So, okay, with the availability of DVDs, it was now possible to sit down and binge watch a whole season of Star Trek, a whole season of The Family Guy, whatever TV show you want to imagine. As an example here, before DVDs, that was almost impossible. Just the size and inefficiency of the VHS video cassette. Okay, but it was still kind of expensive. The shift from DVD to downloadable and streamable video means that now, as never before, people can sit and binge watch a TV show. People can sit and binge watch a series of movies. Again, before, imagine having every Batman movie on VHS cassette. Imagine having every James Bond movie on VHS cassette and sitting there to watch them in one night or 1 week. It's a big, clattering mess. Okay, it was streamlined with the shift to DVD, and now it's effortless and very cheap, inexpensive, if not free, in the era of downloadable video. Right? And people already were corrupted by the culture of the movie and the TV show before, but they are more corrupted now. People already were impaired in their intellectual development by learning their first language through the passive act of sitting and watching others having dialogue on a glowing screen, but they are much more mentally disabled by it now. So this is my point. The impulse to become a polyglot, the desire to learn a foreign language, it could be an antidote to the way in which your intellectual development has been ruined by TV and movies, or it could be, tragically, a pretext for you to return to those habits you developed in childhood, to have a second childhood, to return to movies, TV shows, this mode of quote unquote learning that is actually making you more autistic, that is actually making you, to be blunt, more retarded. The real process of intellectual development involves getting your ass kicked. It involves having conversations with people, having debates with people, having verbal conflicts with people who know better than you, where you can't win, where all you can do is discover that you were wrong. And sometimes that just involves being factually wrong. Sometimes. Sometimes, in a deeper sense, your reasoning is flawed, and you have to figure out the way in which you were intellectually wrong. Afterwards, reflecting on the dialogue. What are my assumptions? What am I thinking? How am I reasoning this through? You have to tear apart those assumptions and learn to understand the world in a different way as a result of that conversation, right? And sometimes you're morally wrong. Sometimes you're emotionally wrong. Sometimes the challenge that comes about through confrontation and conversation instead leads you to reflect on who you are as an ethical human being, as an emotional human being, to question your own motivations and the impacts they have on other people. So look, man, getting older and getting wiser, it's two completely different things. I've had conversations with people about ecology where I am this catalyst in their lives. They happen to meet me at random. We have a conversation, and it totally changes the way they see the world. Obviously, I've had conversations with people about Buddhist philosophy, about politics, about history. And I've had conversations with people where I know so much more than they do. A good example would be communism, where by the end of the conversation, they're standing there peering into the abyss, and they realize now that they've heard this from me, they can't unhear it. They have to make a choice. Are they going to make a bunch of excuses and rationalizations and go back to the old way of thinking they're comfortable with? Or are they really open to learning something new, to going back to the drawing board and being and becoming a different kind of person? Because what you know changes how you feel. You've adopted a new perspective, a new way of thinking. You've challenged and overturned beliefs that were either unquestioned or actually cherished before.